this as straightforward as possible. I like this particular illustration because there are other ways that CO2 is moved in the blood, but the bicarbonate buffer system, which is really what we're looking at here, is the majority of the ways that the way that CO2 is transported. And so I think it's really effective to start with one idea and then add the details on top of it. So this is meant to be kind of the introduction. It's by no means an exhaustive explanation of how this process works, but I think it's really helpful to get kind of the big picture idea here of what your body's trying to do. And we're going to stay focused on this particular reaction that you see right here. We're going to look at it both at the tissues, which is what's represented on the left-hand side, and at the lungs, and specifically the alveolus on the right-hand side. And so if it's not obvious to you why CO2 is produced by cell metabolism, you may want to go and cite your textbook or find other videos talking about kind of the cellular mechanisms of the TCA cycle or citric acid cycle, as you see here. But basically, when we're using oxygen to make ATP, one of the major byproducts here is CO2. And so active cells, which all of our cells in our body are pretty darn active, they're going to be kicking off a lot of CO2, especially when you increase your level of activity or your metabolic rate in any way. So these active cells, we're going to start with the tissues and we're going to work our way to the lungs. The reactions are identical here. Just like chemical reactions, they're always going to be able to go both directions. This is the same chemical reaction, but at the tissues it goes one direction. It kind of flows with a high concentration of CO2, whereas at the lungs it's going to go the other direction. It's going to go towards CO2 offloading. So our cells are going to be producing lots of CO2, which is very soluble, which is different than oxygen. CO2 is going to diffuse through the interstitial space and make its way to the blood vessels. CO2, when mixed with water, will actually form a weak acid called carbonic acid. And that'll happen on its own. So if you take a glass of water and you just blow into it for a while, maybe like 4 or 5 minutes, you just exhale all of the air that you exhale, you put in there, it will actually change the pH of the water. The water will become more acidic. Now in our body, we actually have an enzyme, and it's called carbonic anhydrase, and it does what all enzymes do. It speeds up this chemical reaction. And so in the presence of a lot of CO2 in water, carbonic anhydrase will very, very rapidly convert CO2